What's the most underrated software engineering principle that every developer should follow? Let me know your thoughts below. So, for example, something like communicating with your team early and often might seem simple, but it's a principle that can reduce misunderstandings and improve collaboration, but it's sometimes overshadowed by technical aspects. What do you think? Be kind. Be kind to your colleagues, be kind to QA, be kind to those demanding SO and SOS and SAIL, be kind to your customers, be kind to yourself. Damn, that was very deep. I do think, yeah, I've never understood people who are toxic at work. Luckily, I don't work in a toxic place at all. It's like you have to work with these people every day, see these people every day. Just be kind is probably good advice. And even more so, if you see people struggling, help them rather than waiting for them to come to you sometimes. So learn to say no. I'm terrible at this. I'm generally one of those people who's just like, well, I get paid, my salary. So I just say yes to everything, to be honest. You want me to go look at back end, front end, deployment, whatever, I'll just do it, to be honest. There's always those people. And to be honest, they kind of grind my gears a bit because you always have those people who are like, I'm just like, this isn't my job. They'll just do the very specific thing that they think that they're supposed to do, rather than just getting on with it and solving problems. Because I think as developers, we're getting paid to solve problems. That's genuinely what I think. It's like not just doing whatever specific thing you've said, unless you're like a contractor, etc. So many developers get stretched thin by saying yes to too many things. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I don't think you should go out saying yes to everything. Like at the end of the day, if this is about can you get the work done. I was more talking about what work I'm willing to do. I'm willing to pretty much try and do anything. But I'm not going to say yes to like 10 things at once and then leave a bunch of people disappointed. You have to manage people's expectations. Learning to say no and focus on quality code instead of having a finger in 10 things with only cursory knowledge of any of them. Yagni? You ain't gonna need it. You ain't gonna need it. Building stuff now because you know you're going to need it later is one of the biggest sources of drag on software. Fair enough. What was this in relation to? What's the most underrated software engineering? You ain't gonna need it. Building stuff now because you know you're not going to need it later. Because you know you're going to... I don't know. I guess it's not something I do, so I can't really relate. But yeah, only work on what is actually needed right now. I like the approach of move fast, break things. I like that. I like things, I build something, it goes to testing, it comes back, and then you just go again. Writing code is like writing a story. Just because you wrote something that works doesn't mean it's time to open a PR and call it a day. You need to edit your first draft. Does the solution follow adopted patterns? Can I clean it up? Better naming, comments, cleaner control flow. Should I split merge? Are there any edge cases not covered? What's as a bare minimum? I think this is really intense. And I think actually, I don't know if I agree with this. I think I like I don't know if anyone's ever read about sort of blameless engineering culture. I don't think it's up to the individual engineer. Obviously, I think you should always try and be your best, but I think this is more process for the whole team rather than just something that you should necessarily be doing yourself. Ideally, if you have a great process, all of these things will be covered and caught by every developer and not just you. So I kind of half agree. I agree in the sense that, I think a big part of this here is just being almost the best version of yourself, right? In terms of the code. So where is can't collapse this one for some reason. There is an important just difference between abstraction and indirection. Some of you will probably know my thoughts. I don't like too much abstraction. I like code to be simple, clear, and I think code created for the purpose of fast development and easy development is better than like the best, most abstract code imaginable. That's my opinion. I think it's a balance, probably. Don't make things too abstract. I would agree with that. That would be my advice. Focus on the developer experience. Not to say that you should write bad code, of course. But let's see. Create an algebra for your data that respects the necessary invariants. Don't reinvent the wheel when doing it. Yeah, can you elaborate on this? Because I don't understand this. Write code that is easy to delete. Actually, that's a great line. I might adopt that. Yeah, write code that's easy to get rid of. It's a principle that can drive a lot of the others, but nobody goes around bragging about how deletable their code is. So it's highly underrated. I agree. I always forget to give people a thumbs up. Testing, even if it's not the best testing, any testing is better than no testing. Yeah, people, unless you've worked on something where there is no testing, you don't really appreciate testing. So, yeah, introducing testing where there was no testing previously is really nice, especially when you've got a code base that is changing a lot. And I've been in those situations, and it's like without tests, you can break a lot. You can start breaking a lot of things, you know. So it's good to have testing when you're changing lots of things. Yes, it takes more time to develop. You know, add an extra point onto your tickets probably, but other than that, it's okay. So the only fix one thing at a time. Yeah, this is about context switching. My pet hate, and I'm sure many of yours as well, is context switching between different tasks. That is a pain, and ultimately, in my opinion, just leads to frustration and getting burnt out really quickly in your day. Don't write clever code. I don't know where this is going to link, but I agree. Clever code is bad. Don't write clever code. I agree. We might actually go ahead and read this because, you know, we've got Will Smith and Obama and this guy. What's his name again? I know he plays the Hulk. Ruffalo, Mark Ruffalo. I agree, though. I want code which is simple for the developer to understand and basically work with. I don't want to go through like 15 different recursive functions that are abstracted to the most generic version of this code. I hate it. I hate generic abstract code. Any fool can write code that a computer can understand. Good programmers write code that humans understand. Martin Fowler, I don't know who he is, but he looks like he's pretty based. So yeah, anyway, should we continue with this? Write the simplest code that solves your problem. Yeah, agreed. If the scope changes, the scope changes. For me, the purpose of the code is to do all code is trash, right? All code is trash. So just write the simplest code that solves the problem. And if it doesn't meet the criteria, then write the next piece of simplest code that meets the new criteria. I'm not saying to write spaghetti code. I feel like there's a middle line, right? So trying to optimize code prematurely or picking complex algorithms over simple ones will nearly always backfire. Optimize it. I hate this idea of optimizing when you don't need it. Like, why? Why are you optimizing? If you're working on a ticket and you're like, actually, the fact that this is 10 milliseconds too slow is a huge issue and it's costing us money and it's costing us problems, then yeah, it's the problem you solve. But if it is irrelevant, then leave it. You know, just write the simplest solution. Essentially, it needs to be part of the criteria. Write testable code. To me, this is more important than most clean code principles, because writing testable code is also going to be clean. It forces you to write smaller functions that do one thing and utilize dependency injection. Yeah. Complexity Spirit Demon is your greatest enemy. I've not heard of Complexity Spirit Demon, but I'm guessing this has something to do with code complexity once again. I don't know why I went back there. Understand how something brings value to the business. Do you have to migrate this bunch of servers to Kubernetes? Why? What is the problem? Always come back to this. What is the actual problem? What is it you're trying to solve? How doing this would solve the problem? What's the cost of doing so? What's the cost of not doing it, etc.? Secure by design, do it right the first time. I think secure by design is a tricky one. I feel like no one's really taught to write necessarily secure code, but I do think that most sort of... I've actually worked on making code vulnerable on purpose, which is a lot of fun actually. I recommend it. Like, go out of your... You can look at the OWASP 10 stuff. Let's do... Yeah, you can sort of play around with these and try and purposely make your code vulnerable to actually learn about it. I did that. It was a lot of fun. Sort of, but I kind of had to go out of my way to like make something easy to do, like SQL injection or something. But yeah, secure by design. Always good to be secure. When your boss asks if you can build this, it's not a yes/no question. So many times I said yes because it is possible, but it was also a bad idea. Communicating all the costs associated with the project is very important. Communication is king at the end of the day. There's always drawbacks. You can make code better. Like, you know, you might even get to a point where you're like, okay, actually, it might be worth changing like project architecture, to be honest. Sometimes little things are just too difficult to implement and they don't bring enough value to be worth it. So yeah, don't always just say yes. Basically give your opinion. This kind of goes back to another thing where it's like, don't be scared to sort of look stupid. Close down logical paths as early as possible. Type guards, early return, strict typing. Strict typing is a big one. Yeah. Anything to reduce the amount of paths through the code. A lot of people get like overwhelmed by tools, and it's like, just, you have to change your mindset from it's another tool to learn to this tool exists to make your life easier. Like, that's why these tools exist. So don't get stressed out by learning new tools, you know. Planning ahead is key. It might be tedious thought, but think before you type, and having a sort of workflow is helpful in building what you want. Dry and kiss. always forget kiss. Dries, don't repeat yourself. I'm not a dry extremist, you know. I think there are situations where repeating yourself gives you simpler code, which is better, in my opinion, than having something which is completely dry, like completely don't repeat yourself, but you've had to make it too abstract. That's my opinion. Maybe that's not the hardcore engineering opinion, but that's the sort of product opinion, I suppose. It depends on my mood, I guess. Underrated, naming stuff. Yeah, name stuff accurately and stick to the name. Naming stuff is important. Also, it's like the consistency. It honestly, like obviously, you can use tools to sort. You know, when you've got a bug, you don't really need to know. You can track down the file without knowing, but it's nice if everything is named in a way that makes sense and is logical, because it just, you know, you're human, so you kind of read language, and when you use good names, it makes it easier to understand the concepts and the code. Hopefully, I articulated that well enough. Who knows? Refactor your code while you write it. You need to do the same thing twice. Exclude your first solution. This is definitely true in the sense like refactor your code whilst you write it is good, because especially when you're removing stuff that might now be redundant. Sometimes it happens like this stuff that just stays in the code base. It's like this is now redundant, and because the code base is so big and bloated, it might not even be being used anymore. So if you're like changing something or using a new function, definitely check if that old function you were using is still being used, and if it isn't, get rid of it. I've actually recently got rid of loads of code, which is always fun. Nothing better than just deleting a file. Had your timeline for tech debt, or it will never get done. Tech debt is like a constant battle because your sort of leads, what am I looking for? Like the people you work with, they don't care about the tech, they care about the results. So yeah, this is a tricky one. You have to have a really tech centric team for this to ever get solved. So you know, if you want, yeah, you have to rule with an iron fist here. If you're the tech lead of your project, you have to be like, this tech debt is unacceptable. It's not good enough for us to develop it. We need some time in the sprint to start focusing on tech debt. Writing short functions, short modules, short everything. I ain't reading all that, bro. Test your work. Simplicity. Yes. You know, just one word. Simplicity. And simplify. Sorry. The other person got the upvote. Never use Java. No. I don't like Java that much, but don't repeat yourself. Again, people love just saying this. People love repeating this line. Don't repeat yourself. No magic numbers. Yeah, magic number. Magic numbers, by the way, is basically just using the numbers that represent something rather than like an enum, which has a predictable name. Yeah, so use enums, use variables, don't just use numbers. Complexity is the enemy. Greed. Know when to hold and when to fold. When writing code, primarily focus on making it easy to read. Yeah, I like that a lot of people agree with this notion. Knowing how to talk and reason about design patterns. This is something I don't know a lot about, to be honest. KISS. All developers need to focus on security defensive programming first and foremost. Basic principles. I think this is so hard. You need training. Like, I do think this is one of those things that, okay, yeah, you can just pick up and learn it, but I feel like this is not how people think. They don't go, okay, first and foremost, is this secure? I feel like security is like its own special niche, and maybe if you're a company that really, really values the security, which it should, they all should, there should probably be some training on that front, in my opinion. Basic principle, get the requirements right. And I think, like I said earlier, I think most frameworks, or a lot of mature frameworks at least, are quite secure. They focus on the security. And in my experience, if you're using mature technology, you kind of have to go out of your way to make it insecure. Some people might disagree with that. I might be wrong. That was my experience, but obviously I've only touched small. There's like so many things I've not even tried or done, so that's just based probably on a very small sample size. Basic principle, get the requirements right. A perfectly engineered system does the wrong thing is of no value. That does the wrong thing is of no value in the business paying for your work. Yeah, get the requirements right. That is like, if you're a developer, in my opinion, your job is to do whatever the requirements say. Your job is not to figure out if the requirements are right. That's someone else's job. Obviously, if you're part of the communication, of course, it's part of your job. But once a ticket is sort of created, yeah, the requirements should be there. They should be correct. Everything, all information for what you need to do should be on a ticket or a document or whatever you use. Anyway, I think that's it. So let me know your thoughts, subscribe, leave a like, and thank you for watching.